Welcome to the debate. Today, we are diving into a really challenging and I think globally resonant space in media right now, boys love narratives, or BL. This is a genre that has seen just massive mainstream success. It uses the language of queer intimacy, of same-sex romance, but it often exists in these worlds that, well, they curiously bypass the political, the legal, and the social realities that the actual queer community faces worldwide.
Hmm. It's a deeply complex space, and it's complex because of that disconnect you mentioned. And its popularity is, it's immense. We're talking millions of viewers across Asia and into the West. And so the central question that we really have to wrestle with today is a fundamental one. Does the global prominence of BL mean it has a responsibility to reflect real-world queer politics? Or is its primary value actually found in offering an escape, a kind of softness and joy away from those realities?
My position on this is, I think, pretty clear. Given its unprecedented visibility, its cultural influence, I believe BL now operates with an ethical obligation. It has a responsibility to engage with political reality, to use its platform for more meaningful, more nuanced representation, especially around difficult issues like consent and identity.
And I come at this from a different angle. I'm going to argue that the genre's enduring, and I'd say revolutionary value, is found precisely in its ability to provide that emotional refuge, that fantasy. Demanding that every BL story has to serve as a political tract, I think it risks undermining its whole foundational purpose as a healing escapist space. And that, in itself, is a powerful form of resistance.
Okay, so the core of my argument really rests on understanding the genre's current scale. BL is just no longer a niche subculture that's, shared through fan communities and photocopied manga. What we're witnessing now is an industrial phenomenon. I mean, major studios in Thailand, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, they're all producing these live action series. And they're instantly globalized through platforms like Netflix and Viki. So this mass distribution means that for millions of viewers, especially those in cultures where same-sex relationships are, highly marginalized or even illegal, BL is their first and sometimes their only exposure to queer relationships. And with that kind of visibility comes an undeniable influence. We have significant sociological studies that show positive, complex media portrayals. They actually accelerate social acceptance of LGBTQ plus rights far faster than, say, purely legal or legislative efforts. So if the genre has this immense cultural power, it has an ethical duty to wield it responsibly, especially towards the real communities whose aesthetics and, frankly, whose struggles it profits from. And beyond that, we have to confront the legacy tropes that have plagued the genre since its manga days. I'm talking specifically about narratives that normalize dubious consent or that frame relationships around these severe power imbalances. And of course, the big one, the "I'm not gay, only for you" narrative. This last one, it's often called compulsory heterosexuality with a single exception, and it is especially harmful. When you present these problematic dynamics uncritically to a global audience that's looking for emotional education about same-sex relationships, well, it risks reinforcing some fundamentally unhealthy ideas about love and power and sexual identity. That right there is where the responsibility lies. It's about cleaning up the dynamics within the relationship, even if the setting is a fantasy.
Okay, that is a really compelling analysis of the genre's, industrial present. But I feel like it dismisses the historical and the emotional past that really gave BL its revolutionary spark in the first place. I see why you'd think that visibility translates directly into political responsibility, but let me offer a different perspective, one that's rooted more in the genre's origins. Historically, BL, and we're talking about shonenai and then yaoi, it was created mostly by women, for women, and it was operating way outside of mainstream publishing. Its very genesis was a creative rebellion. It was a rebellion against rigid patriarchal gender roles, against the stifling expectations placed on female desire in heterosexual stories. It was designed to be an imaginative, pressure-free space where creators could explore romance and power and beauty without the crushing weight of sociological realism. So it was, and I think it often remains, an internal dialogue about gender and desire, not a political mandate for legal reform. And the profound emotional survival mechanism this provides for queer audiences today, it really can't be overstated. We're living in a political moment where globally, queer existence is just constantly being debated, legislated against, vilified in the news. So for queer viewers who face real discrimination, family rejection, legal hostility, escapist BL is profoundly healing. Its utopian strength is that queerness is normalized. It's not the source of the conflict. The conflict comes from, personality clashes or misunderstandings, allowing love to just exist without justification. This quiet affirmation, this emotional rest, is vital. Organizations focused on queer mental health, they stress the importance of finding moments of uncomplicated happiness. So, my critique of your position is this. Why must queer-coded stories constantly carry the burden of representation, of education, of political advocacy, when heterosexual romance is allowed to exist in countless genres without any of that justification?
That's a powerful point about the double standard. And I do agree that all romance deserves a space to just breathe. But I would frame the distinction a little differently. The obligation isn't necessarily to become didactic, but to acknowledge the world that is being used, however selectively, as a backdrop. The historical intent of BL as a niche, pressure-free space, yeah, that was absolutely revolutionary in the 70s and 80s. But when that niche product is globalized and commercialized, when it shifts from an underground critique to a multi-million-dollar industry, that fundamentally changes its social function.
But wait, are you saying that the intent is irrelevant now? I'm sorry, I just don't buy that global mainstreaming automatically strips away its value as a refuge. If the original intent was to create a necessary rebellion against rigid structures, that value remains, right? Regardless of the streaming service. We shouldn't trade that pressure-free space, which is a necessity for emotional survival, for the pressure of constant political advocacy. We risk demanding that these stories become mirrors of oppression rather than desperately needed windows of hope.
But those windows can still reflect a grounded reality without sacrificing hope. In fact, I'd argue that grounding the narrative in reality often makes the hope feel, more resonant. And we have proof that effective, responsible storytelling is possible. I mean, think about the Thai series Not Me. It successfully used the BL framework to explore profound social issues, political activism, state violence, corruption, class struggle. The relationship between the leads, it blossomed because of their shared political action. The romance was inseparable from the world they were fighting to change. That's far more impactful than simple fantasy.
I absolutely acknowledge the immense power and the artistic merit of Not Me. I'd even add I Told Sunset About You to that list. That series is brilliant precisely because it uses the backdrop of identity and internalized homophobia, a very real queer struggle, to deepen the central love story. But those examples, they highlight the versatility of the genre, not its universal obligation. My concern is this: demanding that every story meet that high bar of socio-political commentary, it just misunderstands the therapeutic function of the genre. Joy and affirmation, the quiet moments of domestic bliss, those are equally necessary forms of resistance. I often hear from queer viewers that the most radical thing they can see is just two men making dinner, paying bills, and existing without having to justify themselves. So when mental health organizations emphasize rest, demanding constant realism can feel, quite frankly, cruel. It places the burden of educating the majority onto the few queer-coded narratives designed for emotional survival.
I appreciate the humanity in that perspective. I really do. But we need to pivot back to the issue of unintentional harm, which so often arises in these highly escapist narratives. We have to make sure that in creating that space for uncomplicated happiness, we aren't accidentally reinforcing harmful norms through outdated tropes. Let's talk about the seme-uge dynamic from Legacy BL. The seme, the assertive partner, was often portrayed as so dominant that he would just disregard the uge, or the submissive partner's, boundaries. And this is more than just historical baggage. When a global audience who might be unfamiliar with these Japanese genre conventions sees a relationship where power and sexual agency are so unevenly distributed, it normalizes questionable dynamics. The responsibility here isn't political with a capital P. It's an ethical responsibility within the relationship portrayal.
And look, the industry has evolved past this, but highly sanitized, non-political narratives sometimes revert to these simplified, problematic character dynamics, often because they confuse complexity with conflict.
You are ethically harmful. The suggestion that choosing escapism automatically means erasure, or that it guarantees the reinforcement of harmful norms, I think that's flawed. A story can exist entirely outside the sphere of external politics, so no mention of hostile laws or discrimination without reinforcing any harmful internal behavior. It can focus solely on emotional clarity, on kindness, on reciprocal care. Why must we assume a political vacuum equals a political endorsement of bad behavior? I mean, look at a beautifully shot domestic BL-like semantic error. It focuses entirely on the anxiety of two college students learning how to communicate. The political world is absent, but the emotional journey is complex, it's healthy, and it's highly affirming. It proves you can have ethical relationships in a utopian setting.
That's a compelling argument, and I agree that complexity and intentionality are key here. But let's define intentionality. A more responsible BL doesn't mean abandoning fantasy entirely, like you said. It means that the creators have to be intentional about what they are including and what they are consciously choosing to exclude and why, especially given the global stakes. The obligation is not to reflect all of reality, but to understand that when a narrative sells a vision of queer romance to millions of people, the emotional lessons audiences take away about relationship dynamics, about power, about consent, those lessons are fundamentally consequential. If we as creators and consumers approach the genre with this intentionality, this conscious awareness of the emotional education being delivered, that, I think, is the highest form of responsibility. It isn't about featuring a protest march in every episode. It's about ensuring the emotional architecture of the relationship itself is sound.
Intentionality in character dynamics. That's a powerful point of convergence, and I can agree with that. Authors should be intentional about the norms they choose to depict. My pushback remains on the external expectation, the pressure that every BL, simply by existing, has to act as an agent of change for external laws or societal attitudes. The genre is diverse. Its freedom to explore these narratives outside of the political grind is what made it revolutionary in the first place, and its versatility today should be celebrated. The moment we mandate that all BL must carry the weight of global political representation, we risk stifling the very creativity that allows the genre to serve its most vulnerable audience members, the ones who genuinely need the relief and the soft landing of uncomplicated love.
But that freedom has to be tempered by the genre's undeniable global reach. The revolutionary promise of BL is enhanced, I think, not diminished, when it acknowledges the real world while still offering hope. When we see a series like A Tale of a Thousand Stars, which blends gentle romance with themes of community service and identity in a remote setting, we see the blueprint for how you can successfully blend the two approaches. The characters exist in a reality, but their love provides the ultimate refuge.
Ultimately, I still maintain that the genre's strength lies in its profound versatility, in its foundational capacity to offer a revolutionary, quiet moment where love is just allowed to exist, uncomplicated by the external political battles that dominate the daily lives of so many queer people. We should celebrate the space where queer characters can be soft and happy and domestically ordinary. That should be a fundamental right to emotional refuge, that quiet joy. That is a political act in itself.
And I still maintain that while, yes, pure escapism is incredibly valuable, the genre's explosive global influence means its future has to recognize a spectrum where intentionality matters deeply. The genre can and should successfully blend being grounded in reality, acknowledging the systems its characters live under, while still prioritizing hope and emotional payoff. Responsibility isn't a burden. It's an opportunity to deepen the audience's connection to the material.
So I think we converge, finally, on the idea that the answer for the BL landscape in 2026 is truly a both-hand future. BL doesn't have to choose between being a mirror of political reality and a refuge from it. The audience, really, it needs both versions of the story.
Precisely. The goal should be a diverse ecosystem of storytelling, one where queer characters can exist as activists, as complex dreamers, as uncomplicated lovers, or just as people without constant explanation. That diversity and freedom, grounded in an ethical intentionality, is perhaps the genre's most radical and most responsible promise yet.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next one.